everybody. Sorry for the few-minute delay. I had some technical issues with Zoom, but they seem to be straightened out now. And as I was just telling Jessica, that's just a part of our lives in fall 2020 with COVID-19 response and everything being basically virtual. All right, but welcome to Media Monday. I'd like to welcome our guest, Jessica Fuller, who's a digital reporter for WJHL-TV. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
Well, that was a great introduction. My name is Jessica Fuller. I'm a reporter for WJHL-TV. Let's get started. I have been in journalism for about 6 years. I spent 4 years at WJHL, whole new world for 2 years. I thought, it can't be too different. It was different. And I guess one of the questions that Don had asked me was, how was I prepared for life in the COVID world? And the answer is I wasn't. I did have 4 years of experience in print journalism, which, broadcast reporters don't necessarily have. So I was prepared to do stories, that were just over the phone or that were just, over video chat. And that's not something that they were used to. But I have also started doing a lot of data reporting. I tweet a lot about it. I became kind of the numbers person at the news station. So I plug in the COVID numbers every day. I plug them into a spreadsheet and I try to analyze as much as I can and point out any trends that I might see. I kind of knocked into some of those province stats classes that I had what feels like forever ago. So that's kind of where my life has been for the past 6 or 7 months. I don't even know anymore. But that's where my life has kind of been. And I guess that's my best way to introduce myself. I guess I'll toss it back to Don.
As I have to unmute myself, telling you, talk some about, excuse me, what goes into a typical day for you related to the COVID-19 data that we see every day coming from WJHL?
Well, every day I look at what is brought in from the state, or both states. I do both Virginia and Tennessee, and that both states give us such different data that, I can only do certain things with Tennessee that I can't do with Virginia. But I do put them into the spreadsheet, and Virginia's is at 9 o'clock. So, sorry, lost my train of thought. So Virginia's is in the morning. So I look and I see, what's trending in Virginia. Like, I'll look at the 14-day average. I'll look at how many new cases were there today, how many new hospitalizations were there today. What can I tell our viewers about this? What would they care about? And then Tennessee comes down at 3 o'clock p.m. and they release a lot more data. Virginia just releases hospitalizations, deaths, and new cases, but Tennessee releases new tests, all of that, new tests, active cases, which are infectious cases, recovered cases. And something else about this too is that it's changed so much. What I was reporting back in March, like, it's so different to what I'm reporting now because we know a lot more, and the way the data is presented has changed. So it's always changing. It's always something new. And I know numbers, don't seem like they're a lot of fun to people, but I have had a lot of fun trying to interpret the data and make it relatable, and make it something that our viewers can see and read and understand.
And just a quick, this is kind of beside the point, but this is kind of almost an opinion sort of question. Since you see the trends every day, how do you think we're doing as a region right now?
It's better. Something that I think is really interesting is the new cases per day and the new communities about it. The way that I try to tell when somebody gets sick, and they get very sick, it's going to take a couple weeks, if they're going to pass away. So that death trend is always going to lag behind. So if you're seeing a spike in cases, you know, you're going to see a spike in hospitalizations. And then what I've found interesting is a couple weeks later, you know, you're going to see a spike in deaths following that. And it's been pretty consistent the past however long I've been doing this since March.
Yeah.
But overall, it's better.
Yeah, and your last comment just kind of leads me to,
Sorry.
how does hey, my cat was about to jump through the frame just at the same, so you're not alone. How does this time feel for you? I mean, I was just talking to a student today, how it feels like we don't have the same markers of time, and it just feels like we just, you know, we kind of just go through. It almost feels like the same day over and over again. You know, kind of like a sort of a warped Groundhog Day.
Yeah, no, it feels like Groundhog Day, and in journalism, it's a lot of the same way. And it went from, you know, you'd pitch your stories, you'd look for stories, and now everything is touched by COVID. Like, you know, you can't go out and do a story and not talk about how COVID has affected it. Like a couple of weeks ago, I tried to do just a really fun story about the Unicoi County High School. They're trying to bring back the buck ship. And I just meant for that to be a really fun story, but I also had to talk about, well, COVID slowed down the production of this thing, and like the students aren't here to work on it. So it's just everything I do now, it goes back to COVID. And I mean, I guess that's just the nature of a pandemic, you know.
What now, of course, you know, none of us, like, I mean, you know, I still train journalists and teach media classes every day, and nothing in higher education at all, of course, ever, you know, prepared us for anything like this. You know, but you kind of had to, just because, you know, you're in the profession and you're doing it day to day. What parts of your journalism training, you know, helped you in once the COVID era began?
We had to get really creative with a lot of things really fast. And I don't have like an exact answer for that, but I just remember, you know, being inspired to think outside of the box. And you have to do that with journalism anyway. When you're looking for a story, if you're hitting all these dead ends, you have to do it anyway. But it was like that tenfold with COVID. It's, you know, it's how do I do the story and I can't leave the newsroom? Like, you're learning Zoom, so you're already doing a great job. But I also think that having a lot of training in different kinds of journalism, you know, like my degree, I focused in print because writing was just what I was interested in, but also learning about video editing and all that stuff has really helped me too. Because we just had to get really creative with how we get these stories and how we pursue them.
Very good. And when you mentioned video editing, could you take us kind of through the skills from writing to whatever else you do, like in your day to day? You know, what all sort of skills do you have to have and to be able to practice and practice well?
Yeah, so I started at the press, and you know, I would do some video editing there, but that wasn't really the focus. When I got hired at JHL, it was a new position, it was a new idea. How do we bring, you know, somebody with my kind of background into the newsroom, and how do we have this person, you know, create stories and engaging hate content, but like, you know, just stuff for the website. So I actually completely work with an iPhone. I don't have a camera. I shoot and I edit, and I do all of that on an iPhone. And some days it's the biggest pain in my neck, and I want nothing more than a 50-pound camera to lug around, or 15 pounds. I don't know how heavy they are. But other days it's really something that's really good. You know, I'm out in the field, and I can just shoot some stuff on my camera or on my iPhone and edit it together and then just send it back to the newsroom, and they have something to run at the noon show. Like, and that's really easy. I don't have to like they have these big packs called TVUs. They connect to the cell towers, and I don't have to do that. I have a cell phone that does that. So it was a really, trying to think of the word. It was an experimental position for sure. And COVID aside, like that was a challenge in and of itself. I wish I would have known that if you're filling out a new position, hold on to your seat. It's hard. But it's just that I remember I interviewed I actually interviewed Josh Smith and his brother Joe, who works at ETSU, when I was an intern. And what's something they said that stuck with me, they're both in the communications field, and something they both said that stuck with me was, you know, you hear people saying that print journalism is dying or whatever, and it's not. It's you have everybody just trying to go online, and it's interesting to see two different places and just the different ways they're trying to do that.
Yeah, and I say that, and I teach media writing, at least one section of it every semester, and that is always something I say on the first day. Print journalism, newspapers, they're not dying. You know, that's a myth. You know, sure, they're not what they were 20 years ago, but like you said, you know, it's just more of a marriage of all this different media. You know, as far as because newspapers aren't just newspapers anymore. You know, they all have the video and everything like that, and it's obvious that some of those skills serves you well once you applied for and landed the WJHL position. So.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. I mean, I'd learned to be, because I feel like print journalism, you know, has a stronger background than things that are analytical or investigative or things that you know might take a few days with and study and look. But you know, in broadcast world, brave new world for me. You know, you get the story and you're turning it that day. Like if you get one person to talk about it, you're doing a great job. So you know, just my way of like, just my background of like being able to, you know, look at things and analyze them and then create a story or create an article out of it has really helped me become the unofficial data reporter. I kind of muscled my way into that position. Nobody gave it to me. One day I started a spreadsheet and I was like, hey guys, look at this. And now I have 12 spreadsheets.
Yeah, are you, like, you know, we see the, you know, the COVID data every day from WJHL. I mean, I'll be honest, that's one, I can't wait till I get that email every day just because, you know, I want to see how it's going. So you're doing really well with that. And I want to say, do you get a lot of feedback? I mean, a lot of people may not, I don't know how many people know that you're the person compiling that, but I'm sure at least the station probably gets, you know, feedback about that. I mean, what kind of things do you hear related to it?
Well, I have a fan club on Twitter if you want to join me. I get most of my feedback on Twitter, and you know, something that they're also trying to do, like, you know, in the newspaper world and the TV world, is a social media presence. And I kind of found my footing by being the weird numbers nerd and posting all these charts, and you know, this is what I see in this. Oh, can you guys? My connection dropped out. Is everything okay?
You were fading there for a second, but now I think you're good again. You're good.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Just that on Twitter is where I get most of my feedback. I mean, it's mostly like people who are asking me questions, and I try to answer everybody because that's just where I'm the most accessible. But I'll go on air. Sometimes they'll drag me kicking and screaming on air. Sometimes when they interviewed me, I was like, "Don't put me on TV," but see, that didn't really work out. But it's mostly social media, which is also interesting.
Yeah. So have you, and I'm sure that you're not on air very often. Have you gotten any, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Have you got any more of a comfort level? I can just tell you, I could never be comfortable on air. And so.
I've been on air 3 times. And the first time it was so stressful because they're also talking to you in like the little earpiece. And I mean, you know, I'm sure you guys have noticed my attention span can be all over the place. So they say 20 seconds, talk about this for 20 more seconds, and I'd stop. Like, just stop talking. It gets easier. It does, especially if it's something that, you know, you're really comfortable with.
Yeah, and I just see that comment, and it brings me to think about that, about, you know, some of the comments on, and not just COVID, but it could be related to anything. You know, what do you do? How do you remove yourself from some of the just sometimes terrible comments on, or that's in my opinion anyway, you know,
You
on.
should see what people email us. No, I mean, I don't read them, you know, and we try to have like, we just don't have the energy to read. I mean, we don't have the manpower to like, you know, police comments and make sure nobody's like, you know, so we do have like an algorithm that to like, you know, filter out things that are just, but just for my mental health as a human being, I just can't read comments. I am more than happy to engage with somebody who wants to be critical or who has questions or wants to have a thoughtful conversation, even if they don't agree with me. But, you know, if somebody is, you know, insulting my intelligence or how I look or, you know, like that's a non-starter. And the short answer is I just don't read them. And we have an algorithm that we're trying to tweak to filter out just unnecessary stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique issue to what's more traditional broadcast, because, you know, newspapers, you know, we usually don't get comments about our parents.
That's another thing about.
Oh, my cat just entered the frame, by the way.
I see like some of the comments that like the you know, I just call them the broadcast reporters because that's what they do. But like I see some of the mean comments people will send, you know, to them, and I'm not into that. I'm not here to have my like. I'm here to like tell you what I know and, you know, give you the news. I'm not here to like for you to tell me what you know, what you think I look like or whatever.
All right, let's see. And Joshua has a question. You want to go ahead, Joshua? You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, good evening. I would like to ask, how do you ensure your work is accurate and factual?
We'll always double and triple check. It just depends with the story. I always try to get, you know, experts, but sometimes, you know, if I want that second layer, I'll try to find another source. Media literacy is so important, not just for us, but for everybody. Very frustrating right now. But I always have people on speed dial, especially when I get settled into a beat that I'm doing. I personally find it easier if I'm just focusing on the COVID data, or, you know, at my last job, I covered education. So I just have people on speed dial whenever if I'm ever second guessing anything, you know, I'll call them. And I will say that it's a brave new world for that kind, for like scripting and like print articles for TV stations. They're still working on everything out. There is not a great maybe I shouldn't say this, but there's just not a great, like, I'm done with my story. Like at the press, I would send it to the editors and they would proofread my story and make sure everything was okay. But there's not like an intrinsic system for that at a news station. So they're still trying to work that out. But I just keep my sources close and my enemies closer. No, I'm just kidding.
Did that answer you, Joshua? It kind of made me lose my train of thought here.
It's me all the time.
Well, when I first got on this with you, I think we talked about this maybe for a second, but I'd like you to talk a little more about it, because I know this shows my age, but whatever. I mean, you know, when I first went into the profession, you know, you were a writer or you were a photographer for, you know, like in the newspaper. There was not as much of a blending at all of the media. You know, there was no social media yet, you know, and certainly was no videography in the newspapers. But what I wanted to ask was, how did your writing background in particular, and then just your journalism training, specifically print journalism, how did that help prepare you for what you're doing now?
That's interesting. I mean, for my job at WJHL, and I don't mean for this to sound like superior or anything, but, you know, broadcast journalists, you know, they don't have that background in writing now. So, you know, a lot of what their days will look like is they go out and shoot their story way better than I can, because that's what they're trained in. They go out, they shoot their stories, they get it ready for the 5 or the 6 or whatever, and then they have to stay and write a web story. And like, that's just not their forte, just like, you know, I wasn't originally trained in videography. So sometimes I help them out you know, especially if they have a really busy day and I have maybe a lighter day. I help out my coworkers by just writing those stories, but just because, like, it's just that any like creation that you do is going to prepare you for journalism, because you're right, it's all molding together. And that's what was so interesting in my position was, it's, you know, well, can we just do all this on a phone instead of like sending somebody out with a camera and a video camera and all that stuff. So writing helped, but also videography is going to help you, and also photography is going to help you, and I'd even argue some graphic design is going to help you. So just learn as much as you can, I think.
And you do some graphics, right? What's like some of the graphics that you, because I've seen them on the, you know, reports related to the COVID, you know, what sort of graphics are you creating?
Yeah, we recently started using a software called Flourish. It's free if you're like I'm sure ETS you could probably get it too, but it's free if you're like an official news organization. So they are animated graphics and charts. There's another one they use called Infogram, and it's like a whole infographic. So sorry, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants when it comes to stuff like that, but I have created, I know, you know, y'all have probably kept up with the Evelyn Boswell case as well. A couple of months ago, I made a timeline to go in a story like, you know, this is what happened when, and that thing took me all day to do, but I thought it was really engaging. I thought that a lot of people, you know, that gives you a lot of information in a really interesting way, and it's just flexibility, I think, has been my best friend, because, you know, I'm using Infogram tomorrow, but we might find a better software like the next day. So just the ability to learn how to use softwares.
And I always like to bless you. I always like to I always like to ask this especially when I have like someone doing the day-to-day in the media profession, especially even I would say a little more in the broadcast world, but deadlines and deadline pressure. What do you do how do you handle those? Because you know, we teach all the time, and you get to do it in a practical sense, that deadlines are one thing in the traditional print world, but I know they're even more stringent in broadcast.
Yeah, because I hope you don't get mad at me for saying this, but in the print world, deadline was 9:30, but you know, if I bought some cupcakes for the editors, then deadline could be 10 o'clock. But, you know, there's some wiggle room there, you know, because that's just going to push production. It's just a logistical thing, because it's just going to push production of the newspaper just, you know, later and later and later. And then, you know, you have the delivery people who are really, really mad at you for missing deadline like 5 hours earlier. But with TV, and I don't know why I wasn't prepared for this, but it is, if this is not in by 5:55, it is not going in the show. It's so much more strict. And just, you know, my position with doing everything on the phone and trying to like find a way to get it to work with like their existing software, their existing editing software, that's been a big learning curve. You know, just trying to find everything that works, and trying to find a way to get your digital elements into your newspaper or your TV stuff.
Well, I can think of 2 comments, and then I can always have more questions, of course, but I'll open it up to some others if they happen to have questions, so that I don't dominate the time. But just a couple of comments. Number one, you know, the graphics that you're talking about, I mean, you know, you said that you basically use a free program to do them. They work. Yeah. They look great, and so, you know, and the other thing is, I never would have known that occasionally we see footage that was shot on an iPhone. You know, I would have not know the difference.
I have developed an eye for that, but at the beginning I wouldn't be able to tell either. But you know, I also have all kinds of I have like a little microphone that plugs into the just the charging port, and it's great. It works so well. I have a tripod that that a stiff breeze could knock over, but I have one. But I also have one of those stabilizers that's really good for online content. When the Cult Center first opened, I finally got my stabilizer and I got to play around with it. And maybe you saw me in the Cult Center that day.
Yeah.
Oh, it says my internet connection's unstable again. Oh no.
No, we're still hearing you fine.
All the right lights are on. I don't know what's up. Okay, all right. It pops up every once in a while. I'm like, oh, should I stop talking? But it's just, finding new ways to do things. I just feel like it's changing. I mean, I've only been in journalism 6 years, so, maybe this isn't right, but I feel like it's changing faster than it ever has. But I don't know.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Anyway, let me see. Some others have some questions before I throw any more out there.
Sure.
I'm sure somebody does.
I guess one question I have is, I deal particularly with GIS and information systems, and so what all do you have to do? I know you were talking about how you have to input the data for COVID. Do you ever partake in making some of those maps and the things that we actually get to see that display the data that you're entering into the system?
You mean on like in a newscast, what you would see in a newscast?
Correct, like a newscast, or sometimes even when you're on like Facebook and you pull up the website and you see like a snapshot of a map or something like that. Do you all ever work with that hands-on?
Okay, so for the stuff in the newscast, we have like a brand that we have to follow. So what I'll do is I'll get the information to our graphic artist, who will then make the maps that you see on air. So those that you see, no, I did not make those. But if you see anything in a web story, if you see anything that I tweeted or on social media, chances are, yes, I did make that one. And I either use Google Sheets, which they're not the prettiest, but I feel like they get the point across. And then I also use Flourish. Flourish has some amazing just capabilities. And I posted the story that, I literally just finished it and then came here. The daily COVID story that I did, it has this map, this heat map that I've created where it shows, levels of community spread. And, it's just a gradient of, this one's redder because community spread is worse here. I make all of those. So it just depends where you're seeing the graph.
Sure, thanks. That really answers my question, because a lot of the geographical information systems, that part of it, and the GIS is that you have to be able to take the data and interpret it and make something useful out of it. So I think that applies to what you're doing in so many different levels.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with those. I just started learning those 4 months ago, so you probably know a little bit more about those than I do.
Well, it sounds like you're off to a great start there. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, Benjamin. Anyone else? All right. Well, okay. Well, I'll throw some of mine out again, and the rest of you can't say I didn't give you a chance. No, just kidding. Now I know this is a little bit tough to fathom because we're not at this point yet, but now that we're in the COVID-19 era, and once it's passed, do you think that's going to change your position some? I mean, the way you, I don't know, your day-to-day approach, and maybe the types of reports and the way you use technology. I don't know. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know what it'll be after that. Like, this whole point, nobody really knew what my position was going to be when I came there, and that was frustrating. And I'm also thankful for it because, I adapted and overcame, and I found my place. And, when COVID is over, whatever that means, whenever that is, I don't know what that means. I'm sure that I'll carve out another place somewhere. Just a personal note was, I always thought I hated math. I love prob and stats class though. So I think I just like certain math. And I hope that there is a place for that somewhere in my future, because I find that really fun, and I find it really fulfilling.
And well, and since I'm on the COVID line here, I always wonder this, because I'm like kind of on the other side. I just see the data that you compile every day. How do you? I know that you have to stay professional, so it's not too much of a stretch to say COVID's been a pretty darn bleak time for all of us. How do you professionally, what do you do to remove some of that, emotional tie to?
Well, recently I started deleting social media apps off my phone on the weekends. That's amazing. I 100% recommend that. But honestly, unplugging, it's so hard with journalism. You feel like you're on the clock all the time, because I feel like I'm always like, if I'm on Facebook, oh, that could be a story, but like it's really important. I mean, that's really with anything, but just with journalism, I feel like it is really hard to actually clock out. But you're gonna get early burnout if you don't. So.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Trish.
What are your most common ways of getting a news story?
That's a good one. Well, at the press, we had beats, so that was cool. So I had education for a while, and I had entertainment for a while, which was two very different things. But I would go to the board meetings, and a lot of things come up in a 3-hour school board meeting. So I would jot them down and keep up with it that way. But here, what's interesting at the news station is there aren't any beats. So everybody has their eyes on everything all the time. So a lot of them, I'll be honest with you, a lot of them come from social media. A lot of them come from people's tips. And some of them come with just following up with meetings and stuff, but just with the nature of podcasts, we don't go to 3-hour board meetings and sit through all of them, like we don't have the manpower to do that. So it's interesting. It really is. And we just have people with contacts in Carter County here, hey, what happened at the board meeting last night? It's so different between the two worlds. It's really interesting. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I think I know Jessica mentioned this, and just in case I did at one point, Jessica worked at the Johnson City Press, and I actually worked with. Or no, I think you started there just not too long after I'd left and went to ETSU, I believe. So I don't think we ever did work together. But that's what she's talking about when she says the press, and when she says, covering entertainment, covering education. There once was a time that you were much more married to a specific beat, but those have kind of started to blur a lot, especially in the age we are now. And you're very much more often general assignment, and whatever comes up, that's what you're doing, from a newspaper standpoint. And so.
And I mean, there are some days, like, because our coverage area at WJHL is so big, we cover, technically, we cover 7 counties in Tennessee, 7 counties or 8 maybe in Southwest Virginia, and like technically our coverage area extends into Kentucky too. So sometimes literally all we cover is just breaking news, because that coverage area is just so big, and that's just all we can get to. It's just the differences between the two. There's so many that it's I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and since you mentioned Virginia, this is just kind of a curiosity, from a curiosity standpoint. Each state handles their COVID data a little bit differently. Which one do you find one of them like easier to digest, or if there's more, do one of them give more information than the other state? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything. I just kind of.
Tennessee gives so much information, so much. Like Tennessee gives me more than I know what to do with. Like they're like, we have cases at these nursing homes and these schools and this, and like Virginia, they give. The thing is like they give most of their data sets by district, and the issue is I don't know if I know what I want to say, I just don't know if I can word it in a way that makes sense. Like our coverage area spans like a third of 3 different districts. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but like our coverage area doesn't line up with like one Virginian district. Like, so it's just not possible for me to like, because I think they give total test numbers by district, the Lenasco district. Well, I don't think I said that right. We only cover 2 counties in that district. So why would I, report that entire district if we only cover 2 counties in it? It's just, Tennessee's way better as far as like the data they provide.
And just from seeing the data once it's published, that was my thinking, and that I will say that surprised me a little bit, just because that's really good from Tennessee's standpoint. But it's great that they're so forthcoming with all the data. So.
Yeah, but I have an easier time getting interviews from Virginia. I can't win with one. Like,
excuse me, and I have to ask this, and because I know I see it happen with students, and I know I've made plenty of them back when I was doing this on a daily basis too. When a mistake happens, because they do inevitably, what do you do? How do you deal with it?
It depends on the nature of the mistake. It'll happen. It happens where sometimes I'll put the wrong number in the wrong county, and if it's on Twitter, I will I'll correct it as soon as I can. I'll retweet with a quote and say, hey guys, this is wrong. Like, I want to keep it up and I want to own the mistake, which that was hard. That's hard for me to do. Like, because if I just delete it after people have retweeted it, and it's just, it's not a good look. So I try to, if it's on social media, but if it's in a story, I try to have at the beginning, hey, if you read this earlier, there was a mistake in it. And it's also like, what's the caliber of the mistake? Like, did I just spell somebody's name wrong, or did I get something super wrong? I mean, and the hardest part is just accepting it happens sometimes. Like, wires get crossed, and then with broadcast, I don't really know how that works because I don't script for broadcast. I let the producers deal with it. So.
Well, to an extent, and what you just said is you own it and you move on. That's what so.
Accept that it's going to happen. You're going to mess up and it's going to be embarrassing, but swallow that pride and move on.
And I always say, and I'm sure you agree with this, facts, that's the biggest thing. Be sure you get those, right. Because there's certain degrees of mistakes, So.
Yeah. And, there's a difference between, hey, you interpreted what I said, like, that's not entirely accurate, and I don't think this is real because pandemics are fake. Like, there's differences there. So, we get those too sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's very much real. So, the other thing that I'd like to ask, just because it's a practical sense, because you have to apply it. I mean, I talk about this a lot in my different classes, because as crucial as it is to some professions, I think it's even more so to what you do. But that's time management. What do what sort of tips would you have, or what do you do? As far as
you found my Achilles heel. Because I'm honestly juggling so many projects at once. And I think this is just going to differ depending on what kind of person you are. I have found I love bullet journaling. So I will, I just have my own little spreadsheets, my own little pages where, I plan out my whole day. And that is just how I have to do it, because I'll start this story and then I'll get really interested in this other story, but this is the story that's turning today. I need to focus on it. So, that is my personal struggle, and admitting that is what your struggles are. That's number one. So then you can combat it, but also try not to take off too much. Don't try to bite off too much more than you can chew. If you're working on a story and or 2 or 5, and your boss tries to give you another story, your editor tries to give you another story, be like, hey, I've got like 5 stories going on. Like, I can have which one do you want me to focus on? It's knowing your limits and knowing what your weaknesses are, because that is definitely one of mine, and I am working on it.
and me too. I'm always trying to get better at that. another question, and our very first Media Monday, which actually was back in March, and it was the only one that we actually had live. They've all been virtual ever since. Josh Smith was the guest. And I asked him this question, and I didn't mean to trip him up or make him not be able to come up with an answer, but I'm going to ask you the same one because I thought it was not a hard question. If you had to choose one story from your career, whether it was when you were working, in traditional print journalism or since you've been there, what would you choose? I mean, what's the one that you think of and why is that?
Just my favorite one.
Okay, and I'll say the same thing I did to him. You could do one or two if you wanted. So
One or two.
it's too hard to choose.
Well, one of the songs that sticks out to me it was a lesbian couple who lived here, and they lived in Bristol. So at the time, Virginia had legalized marriage equality, but Tennessee had not. So the story was literally, we have this set of rights on one side of the border, but not over here. And I really liked that story because it just shows how, like something as arbitrary as a state line can, just change such an aspect of your life. And I kept up with that family, as the marriage equality ruling came from the Supreme Court in 2015. Yeah, 2015, they were the first people I called, and I kept up with them. And that was the first story that I really was proud of, and I was really, really like, I got something out of that too. I told someone else the story, and I really liked that. Let's see. I'm trying to think of which one at JHL did I like the best. Well, last year.
I should say other than COVID, just because.
Other than COVID. No, yeah. Last year, a coworker and I, we had a haunted Tri-Cities series. So I guess, I don't know if this is cheating. It was technically 3 stories, where I went across the Tri-Cities and I went to find the haunted places in the Tri-Cities. And the jury's still out for me. I don't know if they're surreal, but Quantum Leap is haunted, probably. Out of the 3 places that I did, I was like, yeah, this is a haunted place. You don't think trampoline park, but with that one, I really liked it because I love ghost stories. But also, I got to dig into the history. I got to, what happened to this land? What was here before, and who bought this, and where are they buried? Is there a cemetery here? I don't know. That one was just a lot of fun. It wasn't too heavy. So there's 2. There's one, kind of heavy. I don't know if you call it a feature story, the marriage equality story, and then the just the fun feature. But I got to learn about some of the history in my town story.
Yeah, and sometimes I think people who don't do this profession, sure there is a lot of serious stories because that's life, but you also do get to have some fun stories and get to immerse yourself in those sometimes.
The last year that I was at the Johnson City Press, I was in charge. I didn't have an official editor title, but I was the editor unofficially of an entertainment magazine that they tried to do. I guess it's still out, I don't know, but with that, I got just a lot of experience of planning out this whole section by myself and fitting the stories into it. And it was, I think my boss at the time kind of sensed I was world weary, so he was like, "Hey, why don't you take over this project for a little while? You seem like you need a break from the heavy stuff." So.
Yeah, and pardon the cliche, but as you can probably glean from the conversation with Jessica up to now, is you wear a lot of hats in this profession. You really have to do a lot of different things and efficiently and be good at them. And so that's just the nature, and that is much. Again, me sounding old, which I am. That's much different, than even a decade ago. But you know, it's just the nature of it, and it's exciting though. I mean, to me, the profession is, and again, you know, you hear I don't know, fake news always comes to mind or whatever. And I don't mean to get political or anything like that you hear, but you know, working in it, it's really still a really exciting time, I think, to, you know, be a part of the media. It's a challenging time, but to me, that's part of it, you know. So.
Yeah, it's, you know, with, you know, we also have COVID. We also have like a civil rights movement happening, you know, right now. Do you want a pandemic and civil rights in the same year? 2020, I guess. You know, and it's, I don't know if things are more divided or if they just always have been this divided and it's just really loud because of social media now. I have no idea, but it definitely makes my job interesting most days. Some days it does make it, you know, it does make it really hard because, you know, sometimes you do make a mistake or like your coworker makes a mistake and a whole group of people is mad at you. Like that happens sometimes. It's, you know, just the nature of it.
All right. Well, I have another question, but I just wanted to pause. Other questions from anybody else, or even if you've already asked one, do you have a question? All right. Well, I can say this has been great so far because it's been much more of a conversation, which is what I put right in the title of Media Mondays, but usually it ends up the person presenting, which is fine because, you know, then I'm not asking as many questions, but this is great. This is like an actual conversation.
Okay, so, I didn't prepare anything because if I do that, I will just clam up. I have to go by the seat of my pants.
No, it's been great. Well, one question I'll ask just to make sure that I get to it, and I don't know if this is tough, but if you had to give one piece of advice to people who are, you know, possibly at least thinking about entering this profession or any media related profession, because I have students from, I don't know if they're represented here necessarily, but, you know, kind of students from across the board thinking about going in different facets, you know, what overriding piece of advice would you give?
I feel like it's been the general theme all night. Just try to get as much experience in different things as you can. Get comfortable with a camera, get comfortable with Photoshop, be a jack of all trades, master of none. You know, I was really, really heavy on the writing, and that is still my favorite thing to do. I'm still, first and foremost, a writer. That's really what I like to do. But I do feel like I sold myself a little short by not, you know, getting a little more comfortable with videography while I was at ETSU. That's my bad, you know, but I feel like I could have done more to prepare myself by being more comfortable with those kinds of things. I still struggle with some editing software. You know, I learned Adobe Premiere and they don't use that there. So it's just the flexibility and always just be looking at just different things to learn, different platforms. I'm always learning a new platform and I'm always learning a new way to do things.
I know that, and what you just said just kind of made this question come to my mind. Pardon me. What all social media channels do you post on from WJHL? I mean, like as part of the profession.
Yeah, well, right now it's Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We were talking about TikTok, but with the uncertain future of TikTok, that got kind of put on the back burner. Those are the three big ones, though. And we also, at JHL, this wasn't a thing that happened at the Johnson City Press, but at JHL, we do have monthly best practices meetings where we, listen to presentations from across the company of people who are doing different things on social media. Like, hey, I found out this works on Twitter, but it doesn't work so well on Facebook. Like, it is a constantly like, oh, well, this is the kind of content you post on Instagram, and that's how you bring people back to your website. I mean, one of the harsh realities is, you know, things are going on, and and a lot of places are focused on trying to get people onto their website. Like sometimes it can be a slippery slope to feeling like you're just posting clickbait. But I have been able to hold on to my integrity as a journalist And incorporating social media, and sometimes it's a challenge for me because sometimes I do feel like I'm just trying to get likes and trying to get retweets or whatever, but it's just part of it now. And there's different ways to use each one. I never would have thought that. It's nuts.
And that actually brings me to a different question. And we actually were just talking about this in leadership in our division recently. And I like to ask you, because you have to do it on an absolute daily basis, how do you approach posting in a professional sense as opposed to your personal social media? I mean, what's the balance, or do you I mean, I don't know, just talk about that a little bit.
Woo! Well, my personal pages are a trip. No, I'm just kidding. I personally think it's important to try and bring some of my personality to my professional Twitter. So I do, for some reason, Twitter's my best one. I don't know. I feel like it's the worst social media, and it's the one that I'm best at. But Twitter, I try to keep my personality in there. But I'm still a journalist, and I'm a person of opinions, but I'm also a journalist who has to try and remain objective as I can. So that can be like a toe to line to toe, and it can be hard. But I just try to stay factual. And sometimes even when you do write something, especially if you're live tweeting something, it can be easy for bias to slip out, just in the way that you use your words, and just and it's so easy, and people will catch on to that, and they'll call you for it. And sometimes they're nice at it, but I can't think of an example right now, but it's hard. It's a hard line. It's a hard line to balance on.
Do you have like 2 separate accounts on each types of social media, personal and work?
Well, I don't have a Facebook, I don't have another Facebook page. I don't have I have a page that you like, just the like page, but I only have one Facebook account. And that's my personal one. And I have a disclaimer on there, and I'm like, my beliefs are my own, and I'm allowed to have them. I'm quite an opinionated person. But with Twitter, I have 2 separate Twitter accounts. Instagram, I don't have a professional Instagram. I sometimes post to the WJHL Instagram, but I don't have a Jessica Fuller JHL Instagram. But yeah. The broadcast reporters, though, the ones that are on TV all the time, they have decoy Facebook accounts mostly because people are weird, and they have this account, but this is their real account. I don't have to do that because I'm not on TV too much. I don't have to do that yet. So
which is your favorite? Twitter? Is that your favorite to use?
So professionally, I like Twitter the best, because just from what I do, especially with the COVID stuff, I just feel like it's just the best for that kind of thing, because I can just tweet 40 things and it's totally accepted. Personally, I'm more of an Instagram person, but that's just a personal, I like sharing pictures of my cat preference.
All right. Well, actually, we are just about at time. And so I really wanted to say first is thanks so much every day for getting that COVID information out. I mean, because I think I speak for probably a lot of people, many more who are on this, people in the region that, that's where they get it. That's how we know, how things stand in this area. And that is so important, I think, just to, just so that we know. And it, and even if cases are going up, to me, it still gives us a little bit of a feeling of comfort just because we know, what it is. And so thank you for doing that on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you so much for thanking me. Sorry. Sometimes it is hard to, feel appreciated in this job, because sometimes the negative voices are the loudest ones, but, I appreciate y'all.
Yeah. All right. Well, and now we have hit the 8 o'clock hour. So again, Jessica, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. Very engaging conversation. So just thanks a ton.
Yeah. I hope y'all learned something.
Yeah. And keep up all that awesome work.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Follow me on Twitter. It's my best one. All right, I gotta go make dinner. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Jessica. And thanks, everybody. And as always, I'll shut up and I'll see most of you virtually later.
All right, bye, guys.